Hi, good morning, everybody. Appreciate you being here and being on. Obviously, we're very excited about where we are today with the announcement of the schedule and moving forward with a commitment to to play the season. And I know our football team has indicated that they want to be able to have an opportunity to play as long as it's safe. And our presidents and everybody did a great job, and athletic directors over the last several days, um, working through this process. So. Um, we appreciate you being on, and with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Scott Fritchen.
Yeah, Gene. One of the stories that Sports Illustrated had last night said that the Big 12, in essence, kind of saved college football with its decision. Can you walk me through the last 24 hours and just how that decision came to be?
It's a great question. I don't know that we've saved college football necessarily. I mean, we still have a long ways to go between now and September 12th. And certainly we need to do our best to keep these kids safe, whether it's, making sure we're testing them and keeping them, safe from the mask wearing and the social distancing and all those things. And when students come back. But I do think it was a great step to say, we're committed to our student athletes, because when we talk to them and coaches talk to our athletes, and they want to play, but they want to play with the opportunity to be safe. And I think over the last, really more than 24 hours, probably the last several days, between, presidents talking and us as ADs and coaches talking, we really wanted to say, what do we need to do to be safe? And our medical advisors, Dr. Gorel and our staff here at K-State's been awesome. And then all the team docs have really worked through together to come up what is the best way we can continue to move forward and do it safely. And that's what, over the last really the 24 hours, is where they, yesterday in particular, had the conversations with many doctors beyond just our Big 12 doctors. We had additional cardiologists, we had pulmonologists, we had infectious disease docs. And after, probably I would say probably an hour of conversation, they kind of came up with the additional protocols that we put into place. So it's been I learned a lot in the last several days, in words that I can't even pronounce, to be honest with you.
And just in the last hour, I mean, the phone is blowing up. People wanting to know, K-State fans wanting to know, will they be able to attend games? You had an interview on 580 Talk Radio probably about 10 days ago, talking about the fact that the operations staff was working around the clock trying to come up with some plans. What are those plans at right now?
Yeah, they've been actually working for a while, Scott, to be honest with you. Our operations staff, our marketing staff, our ticketing staff, our Ahern Fund members, putting plans, but actually multiple plans together, and working with our county to wait to get that, go ahead with whatever number of fans we're going to be allowed to have. We do know it's going to be limited. We just don't know what that limit's going to be. And until we get that word, we just have our plans in place. And hopefully in the next few days, we'll kind of put out operationally what we'll be doing, even if we don't have a fan number, but we're still kind of finalizing that and tweaking that. But the county health department and folks in the county are the ones who give us that number and that go ahead at some point. Thank you.
Ellis.
Yeah. Hey, Gene. Good to see you. Going off that same kind of question, if the county doesn't change their current restrictions, which I believe is at 2,000 fans, is there any kind of waiver or anything you could do to get around that, or would you have to adhere to it?
Well, that's kind of what we're talking with them about, Kellis, to be honest with you, is what are our options and what are the procedures we have to put into place and go through to get the approval to have more than 2,000 fans in a venue. So I know they're working on a lot of things that they're in terms of the county health department and our county commissioners. And with our folks on campus, President Myers, our provost, we've run it all by their leadership here, our cabinet on campus. So we've got what we think is a good plan, and we will get that to them. And if they need additional feedback to say, well, what are you going to do about this or that, we will certainly have that in place. So we were kind of hoping to have that this week. But we didn't know what the Big 12 decision was going to be, so we wanted to wait till we got that finalized. And now we'll go ahead and continue to move forward with the county and try to get a number and get our processes in front of them So we know what we need to do to get the approval above the 2,000.
And given just how much things have shifted lately, has your confidence level in playing football this season changed with it?
And it's like riding a roller coaster. It's up and down. Right now it's up. And really the conversation last night with our docs and with our presidents and the ADs, we're committed to try to play football. But we're also committed to make sure we're going to do it safe and that our athletes are not going to be in any sort of additional harm. And if, at some point between now and September 12th, our medical advisors tell us something different, then we'll certainly adjust. But I'm confident that we all know, at least in the Big 12, our presidents, our ADs, our coaches, we want to move forward to play football this year.
John Kurtz.
Yeah, hey, Gene, good to talk to you.
John.
Do you feel like with the Big Ten's announcement, kind of the way all of that played out, that there was an element of them, perhaps the Pac-12 trying to put pressure on you guys, the rest of the leagues across college football to join with them?
I don't know if it was, direct pressure. I don't know that, I certainly didn't get a call from any Big Ten or Pac-12 AD, and I don't know that our presidents did. But I think there was perceived pressure that if those two conferences, we're going to have to make that decision. And that's one of the things we talked about is we can't necessarily worry about how they came to their decision because there are different circumstances in the Pac-12, for instance. The city of LA and those areas are have much more positive cases. They have much more issues to deal with. The Big Ten, they've got Rutgers and Maryland out on the East Coast that have some additional issues. So we said, what's best for us? Whatever decision we make needs to be what's best for the Big 12 and not worry about what the Big Ten, because they came their decision for different reasons than we did. And so we felt pretty confident that we had to make a decision for our student athletes, our coaches, our programs to decide what's the best for the Big 12. And when we got there, then we worked through the process from that point.
I know Commissioner Bowlesby had just mentioned non-conference teams will be subject to the same level of testing that you guys have. Is that something you guys will have to pay for in the case of Arkansas State?
Well, that's a good question. And we actually talked to Arkansas State this morning, and they had planned on doing a test because that's what was in the NCAA protocols. But we told them now, we sent them our contract, we actually said they would need to follow the Big 12 protocols of testing. And that's now changed from 1 to 3. And we offered to help them with that if they so desired. And I think we probably will for the additional 2 tests. Just because we want to get that 10th game. But the other thing is our athletes want to know that they're tested, right? They want to know that they're coming in negative. And so again, that commitment to our student athletes to be safe, that if we had to pay for those extra 2 tests, then we would be happy to do that.
And do you imagine it being any kind of a challenge to get to 3 times a week testing, whether that's financially or just logistically?
Well, it's going to be both. I mean, it's obviously not cheap. Now, when we talk to Dr. Girl and our medical folks, we're hoping that those numbers come down and the types of tests that can get the reliability get better. 1 test per week will be the current PCR test. And then we're looking at the antigen testing and maybe a swab of some kind. Again, I'm not a medical doctor, but we think those tests will be available by the time September rolls around, and that there'll be a faster turnaround for those. But I know one requirement is one of those 3 has to be a PCR, and the other 2 will be either an antigen testing or some type of nasal swab.
Appreciate it, Gene. Thanks.
No problem. Thanks. Good to see you.
Cameron.
Gene, going off of the Arkansas State, you talked about that. They were chosen as the one non-conference opponent. What was the decision like to choose Arkansas State? And was there really any other teams entertained at all? How long did that process kind of take to choose Arkansas State out of the Sun Belt?
It actually happened pretty quickly as the conferences, not just us, started to go to conference only. A lot of things began to open up, and obviously we were still committed to try to play both either UND or Buffalo, depending on what happened. And then, of course, the FCS decided to not play, so that's when we lost North Dakota, and we were still kind of waiting for the MAC. But in the meantime, we were starting to get calls from the Arkansas State and other teams. There were probably 3 or 4 teams that had reached out to us about the potential to play. Arkansas State was one of the earlier ones, and we just kept that conversation going. And once we decided that we were going to go conference +1, and then we knew MAC, the Buffalo, and North Dakota were out, then we started finalizing the conversation with Arkansas State because they had been one of the earlier ones. And it moved pretty quickly, and we were able to get an agreement. It worked out for them and us.
So one of the big things going on this week was talking about teams wanting to join conferences. Nebraska was one of those teams that was really talking about that. Commissioner Bowlesby said that the Big 12 hasn't really entertained any of those ideas. I was just wondering, what's your opinion on all of that talk?
Well, I think it's not really not appropriate. It's not the right word, but I don't think it's really going to happen. I mean, we're all committed, at least in the Power Five, to some pretty strict conference agreements and contracts and television contracts. And so, I'm not sure if Nebraska even wanted. Now, Notre Dame is a little different because I think there was a relationship with the ACC, and they are an independent. So other than their NBC contract, but for us to bring somebody else in, we would have some serious contractual issues to deal with, and for Nebraska or somebody to leave their conference would be highly unusual. So I think it's just social media talk right now and not really accurate.
Thanks, Gene.
Hey, Gene, hope you're doing good.
Good, how are you doing?
All righty. Hey, on the teleconference with Bob Bowlesby, you just referred to the medical stuff that they had in place was, and I'm just using his words, garbage 60 days ago as opposed to now. What did you guys learn that, made you finally realize that what you had was garbage in place, and then have a follow-up after that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing it was twofold. I think our doctors and Dr. Gurl, if he's our K-State doctor here on campus, but he's also been one of the leading advisors for the Big 12 and the Power 5. So I've been fortunate, and our medical staff and coaches have been fortunate to talk to Kyle pretty regularly about just where we were going throughout the process. And he started kind of mentioning a few weeks ago that he felt we probably needed to test more than once in terms of testing for COVID. And we've known about the cardiac concerns about how the virus does attack or can potentially attack the heart. And again, he kind of mentioned to us, that's, and we have been doing EKG testing and echo testing of our kids that have already tested positive. But a couple of days ago, he said, Gene, I'm a little concerned we need to take the next step, which is a cardiac MRI. And so on the call that we had yesterday, we had a couple of cardiologists. Like I said, we had pulmonologists. We had a bunch of doctors outside of the Big 12 team doctors that really kind of enlightened us and talked us through the issues and the potential issues if a COVID positive athlete would have potential on their heart. Now, the studies are small, the data isn't there, but we didn't want to take the test. And like any other athlete we have a very strict concussion protocol to return to play. If somebody were to have a serious neck injury or serious back injury, we have some pretty strict protocols before we allow those athletes to come back to play. And that was kind of the biggest issue is, look, guys, even though we don't know for sure, we want to make sure before we allow them to come back to play that they feel safe, that their family feels safe, and that we've done everything we can. And I think that's where the comfort level of the president started to grow, that if we do these tests, we'll feel better about whether the athlete is safe to play and can return to play.
My other question to you was, obviously there's been talk of Collegiate Players Association, and we've seen on your campus how your players have a voice and can speak up from what we saw in June with all the racial injustice going on. My question to you about that is, do you feel like a player association is coming? Would you be okay with that if they kind of had a not necessarily a union going for us, since it's the name of their association, but something where they have a collective voice that you guys take into account much more to listen to?
I've actually applauded all of our athletes, not only here at K-State, but just collectively through the Big 12. Obviously not talked to any Big 10 or Pac-12 athlete. And we've done a great job. We be in the conference, Bob and some of our leadership ADs, we've been talking to we've had 2 calls of 2 athletes from each of the Big 12 schools to talk about where we are, whether it's COVID, or anything else. And they have been talking on their own. And so we had a call this week about kind of, what they were thinking. Their biggest concerns were the eligibility, the extension of the clock, keeping their scholarship if they opt out. Had really good conversations. And so I encourage that. And we have in our campus, we obviously have the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, and Coach Kleiman has a leadership council beyond just his captain. So we're kind of already, but we're encouraging them to bring those voices, feel more comfortable coming to us as leaders and administrators saying, hey, this is what we want, or these are our concerns, because I think we need to hear that. And we need to do everything we can to make sure that their experience here is even better. Now, we've done a lot of great things, but there's things that they have concerns about. So I encourage them to speak out and share their concerns. And if we can fix it, great. But we also have to have honest conversations with them and say, guys, we're probably not going to be able to have you share in the TV revenue. I mean, that's just, but there are some things we can do, and more testing and all the things that we put into place were things that those athletes gave us feedback on. And I think it's great.
Thanks, Jim.
Kellis.
Gene, do you have any sense on how you'll handle the canceled games yet? Would you want to reschedule Buffalo, North Dakota, and Vanderbilt for future years, or what do you think you'll do there?
Yeah, we haven't, I'll be honest with you, I haven't talked a lot to Vanderbilt, just because just haven't had time. And I know but I have talked to both the AD at Buffalo and UND, and have talked about looking at out years. We haven't solidified anything. And, we haven't, in terms of the guarantee and all that stuff, that's kind of off the table because they canceled on us and we canceled on them. But I'm fine, play both of them at some point. We just really haven't looked at each other's out years. I don't think we even have an option until 2026 at this point. So, but yeah, if they want to play us and it works, we'd be happy to play them again or put them back on the schedule.
My last question is, I was a little curious, does the league have any policy or procedure set up if you do have to make up a game, how that would be handled?
That's one thing we're still working through with our coaches in terms of what's going to require cancellation. So if, what's the percentage of athletes that may not be available to play? That's the one thing we haven't finalized yet, but it'll be a conference decision. And so say, for instance, we're going into, the Oklahoma State game and they come back and say, we've hit the threshold, whatever that threshold is, that we can't play because we have this many kids positive. Then the way the schedule is set, we have options. We have the 2 bye weeks, and then we obviously have the additional week at the end of the schedule that we maybe can make up those games down the road once they go through whatever their quarantine or isolation period is. So it's going to be a conference decision, and it's going to be, consistent across each team, but we haven't finalized what that threshold is going to be yet.
Scott Fritchen.
Yeah, Gene, as a member of the Big 12 subcommittee for scheduled development, was it your recommendation that K-State should open on the road at Oklahoma?
Trust me, Scott, I've seen some of them where they had us at Oklahoma, at home against Oklahoma State and Texas. So, so it's been, I've probably seen a dozen or more versions. But that's the one thing on being on these committees, you kind of got to take your personal stuff out and just look at what's best for the conference. And this is my first time. And normally we don't even have input on the schedule, right? Normally we get the schedule and that's the schedule. But because of uniqueness, we had this subcommittee and we went, and the biggest thing was talking about what they could collapse and common opponents. So if you did have a delayed game or I don't know if you saw where it could actually be held and not even started till October 3rd if we had to and still get all the games in. We have a scheduler doing that for us. And those are all things that I'd never seen before. So, but yeah, no, I think this is year, 16 or 18 out of 20 that we've been on the road for the first game. So, but yeah, you have to kind of not focus on that and focus on the bigger picture.
Sure. Thank you.
Time for a couple more. Ryan Black.
Good morning, Gene. How you doing?
Good, Ryan. How you doing?
Well, hey, Gene, it's kind of a follow-up to what D. Scott just asked is, I've seen a lot of fans curious about it, and I am as well. What's the reason that you guys had to reshuffle the schedule in terms of the Big 12? Like, why not just have stayed with what you guys had with? And I know you had to maybe build in the off weeks, but why are you guys now at Oklahoma instead of starting at West Virginia, for instance?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, this is where our scheduling guru really helpful. And I didn't, like I said, going through it for the first time, there was a lot of things that I'd never even heard him talk about, like being able to collapse the schedule and being able to have the opponents kind of spaced together. And then we have, core principles of scheduling, and we have some soft principles, and then trying to make sure we met as many of those as we could. So when they put it together, we would get the games. Like I said, I probably saw a dozen different versions. All of us keeping the opponents that we were supposed to have at home and the opponents we were supposed to have on the road. So you didn't have to play somebody 2 years in a row. So that was obviously something that was important. But how they figured out the collapsing and who played was really critical in us being able to have adjustments during the course of the year if there were cancellations or postponements. And so each time we looked at one, there would be, until we got to this one, there was one or two teams that were really not meeting the core principles. And until we got to this one, it met most of the core principles and a majority of the soft principles. So that's why we came up, but we had to keep adjusting until we got there. It was a lot of conversation, believe me.
Last one here, John Kurtz.
Yeah, Gene, was there ever a moment in the last 72 hours, 3 or 4 days, where you felt like the tide was turning to the point where for the Big 12 football was going to be over?
Yeah, there was several. I'll be honest with you. When the Big Ten and the Pac-12 came out, it was feeling pretty that ominous that we weren't going to have football. There were a few of us that were pretty strong that we wanted to do everything we could. There were other ADs that just started to think, is this really what we needed to do? And then that's why the call yesterday I think was so helpful with everybody, was because of the numbers of really talented and smart cardiologists and folks that kind of helped us through our ability to play safely for athletes if we did these additional protocols. And I think by the end of the call last night, most people were feeling pretty good about it and felt that we were making the best decision. And I think that's what it came down to is this the best decision for the Big 12 and our student athletes? And are we giving them enough information where they feel like they can walk out on the field every day and be safe? And again, if something changes, we have the ability to pivot and not continue to move forward. But right now, we're pretty excited about being able to get to this point.
Then just one quick clarification. I know you addressed this a little bit, but we guys have to pay any cancellation fees like for the North Dakota or Buffalo games?
No, we will not. Both those are off the table. And it was mutual agreement. Had North Dakota really wanted to play us, but we didn't, we'd probably had to figure that out. But both of the ADs were like, look, let's just wipe it off the table. If we can play later, great. If not, we'll just call it good. So we will not have to pay those cancellation fees.